So moving on, let's just move quickly through a couple more of these things about Ahnsahnghong, and then just kind of show. We got a couple quick points about Jesus to talk about to kind of contrast with that. So Ahnsahnghong, he was a false teacher for teaching a lot of different things that are obviously unbiblical. Steve, you already mentioned that he was married and had children. And so
I want to mention something about that one.
Yeah. I was going to say, kind of clarify that, because I know that's another place where there's probably conflicting information. So clarify that really quick. Yeah.
So the thing is, because I was baptized in the World Mission Society Church of God in 2007. So in 2007, from 2007 until I think about 2012, 2013. When the examining site was created, we were told that he wasn't married, that he didn't have children, and the evidence of that is still carried out throughout. It is still found carried in the New Song book, where it says, he was alone for 37 years. He preached alone for 37 years. Basically, just over and over again that he was alone, that he did everything by himself. And when I left the church, I had actually asked this question, what does that mean that he was, alone if he was married and had children? And the answer I was given was, they didn't financially support him. That's what it means by he was alone. And I was like, no, that's not what, no. So not only that, but the church had, this was something else that the church had covered up. And once the examining site came out, and on the examining site, they have, an actual third-party translated census, where it shows Ahnsahnghong, like his birth date, his parents' names, all his children's birth dates, his marriage date, who he was married to. I mean, once that came out, like they couldn't deny that he had, children and he was married. And then, so their explanation to that became like, well, why can't he be married and have children? And they show that verse in Hebrew that says he has to be made like us in every way. But the thing is, if that information hadn't come out on the examining site, I can guarantee you they would still be running that rhetoric that he was not married, did not have children, he did everything alone for 37 years. Yeah, so they keep on
changing the history.
Yeah, and it's a sign of, that's a big sign of like a narcissistic, high demand cult-like group is gaslighting, because they very clearly taught something for so long that he was not married, that he did not have children. And then once that information becomes available, they denied that they never even said that. And they said, well, what does it matter? Why are you focused on they throw it back on the person?
Well, they did the same thing about being a Buddhist.
Yeah, that's a big one. That one, I know you've shown this in previous videos too, Jordan, and I know Jeremy has shown this too. Is that can you screen share that one? I think I sent you that link.
Yep, let me see.
It's from, actually, I had to use the Wayback Machine to find that, because it was on the church's website, but they actually removed it. And they actually, I want to find another link too.
They keep changing their history. They change things out of their books. They change the history. I mean, if you're a current member of the church and watching this, you're only going to believe what you're being told today. But if you were in the church 10 years ago, you'd believe something very different. And, for 5 years from now, it'll probably be something different again. They keep rewriting the history on you. They're not an honest organization.
Yeah. Ooh.
All right, Kelsey, here's that link.
Okay, so let me go back to the screen, because there's another link I want to send you. But okay, so can you go to scroll down, keep going, keep going. Okay, there. So the paragraph where it says Christ Ahnsahnghong is the one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is using the Wayback Machine, which is like a site that allows you to look at other sites, at a specific point in time. So it's basically
hold on. So it's basically, just explain what the Wayback is. So when the internet, changes an article, it basically captures what was around that year then. So even though something may be changed, you can go back in this Wayback Machine and see what was written like 10 years before. It's a screenshot. It's basically a capturing of that site at an earlier date.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So the point of that, why that's significant, is because that we are showing you right here what the World Mission Society Church of God used to officially teach.
This was their webpage from what year? From this is the top right there. 2009. February 2009. So this is how the WTV or the church site used to say, Zion USA, this was what it says, but now it's all been taken down and hidden.
Yeah, so this is like an official church site, zionusa.org. Members will know this, right? Especially long-term members will know this. I think now they're more they have like so many different sites by location now to drown out the Google algorithm. But so here it says so again, this is a screen share from February 4th, 2009, right? So this is what they had on their site. It's not there anymore, but this is what they had on their site in 2009. It says, Christ Ahnsahnghong is the one who satisfied the conditions of Melchizedek by coming in the flesh to South Korea in 1918. When Christ Ahnsahnghong was born, the majority of the population of Korea was either Buddhist or Confucian. There was no trace of Christianity in Korea during the early 1900s. It was impossible for Christ Ahnsahnghong to be born in a household of Christian or believers. Christ Ahnsahnghong was born to a Buddhist family. As a result, he fulfilled the condition of Melchizedek being without father or mother. It says directly, not like, he could have been. It says he was born to a Buddhist family, right? So Jordan, I just sent you a link in the chat. Can you open up the link I just sent you?
Yep.
Because this is a site that was created by the church as well. It's called the truewmscog.com. So if you could open up this site was actually created in response to the examining site being created. And so you can see the title of this article, right? Christ Ahnsahnghong was not Buddhist. And then can you scroll down? It says, so it starts off, I don't know how many times I've had to explain to people that Christ Ahnsahnghong was not Buddhist. Seriously, there are so many websites and individuals out there saying that Christ Ahnsahnghong was either Buddhist or that he was born to Buddhist parents. Well, what site said that? The church's site said that.
Yeah.
ZionUSA.org.
I like how in this second sentence here he says, let me ask a simple question. Can you give any evidence that Christ Ahnsahnghong and or his parents were Buddhist?
Unbelievable.
Well, yeah, go back to, we're not, but the WMSCOG gives you evidence.
But not only that, but I know there's a line in here that I want to show. So it says, I guess the answer is no. There's no evidence whatsoever. The only source they point to is Christ Ahnsahnghong Wikipedia entry. And it says, by the way, Wikipedia is not the most reliable source of information, especially about Christ Ahnsahnghong. That's funny because if you see the older evidence book, the skinnier version, they cite Wikipedia left and right. But
right.
Yeah, let me make a comment. So a lot of people don't get this about Buddhism because I study Buddhism pretty intensely, and a lot of people will say that, Buddhists, they believe in gods. No, they don't. Buddhism is an atheistic religion, or so they'll call it non-theistic. Some people say it's a philosophy, not a religion, and it's non-theistic. So Buddhism does not believe in God or does not believe in the soul. They're naturalistic. So that's a thing. It's like, it's interesting. If he was a Buddhist a chunk of his life before becoming a Seventh-day Adventist, here's God not believing in God, Buddhists are non-theistic. No God, no soul.
Oh, you know what?
And people always argue with me and they say, look it up, and they find it.
Can you actually, you know what? Can you screen share again really quick? I want to show a comment at the bottom. Let me make my screen bigger. So can you scroll down a little bit more to the comment section, just a little bit more? It's going to be the third comment. Paul Francis Das. So this is what Paul Francis Das says. Thank you so much for this post. I am an Elo. So actually, this is just a name posted on here. I don't know if this is a real name, but thank you so much for this post. I'm an Elohist and an active member of the Church of God. I have seen many people in my church, even leading members, spreading this wrong idea about Christ Ahnsahnghong parents being Buddhist. Now the reality is known. I hope this nonsense will soon come to an end. Do you know why leading members spread this wrong idea about Christ Ahnsahnghong? Where do they get it from? the church. When I first learned how to preach about Melchizedek back in 2008, that's a point I was taught to bring up. And I know other members, I think like Isabella in her video, she brought this up too. And so it's because we were taught that. And that, this is catching the church in its own lie. So again, the true church wouldn't need to, cover up their own lies.
They're dishonest organization.
It's
Jehovah's
gaslighting.
Witnesses do the same thing. Yeah. They said 1925, they predict the end of the world. They say, we have more evidence that 1925, this is the Jehovah's Witnesses, we have more evidence that 1925 will be the end than even Noah had of the coming flood. And then when 1925 came along, it said, Satan has injected into the minds of his followers that 1925 will see an end to the work. Come on, it was the organization teaching that a book called Millions Now Living Will Never Die. They taught it for years and years. And then of course, they try to blame it on the members. Oh, you awful people.
Yep.
That's what cults do. Organization's never wrong. It's always the followers.
Yeah. And that's why it's a common, narcissistic, high demand, cult-like tactic, gaslighting, making you think that you were wrong in your thinking. And it messes with, because like when I was a member of the World Mission Society Church of God, I was, I thought like, oh, if this is a cult, like I don't care, right? I was like, in my head, I'm like, oh, Christianity can be considered a cult. I don't care. But the thing is actually you should care, because the effects of cults on you, like psychologically, really does a lot of damage. And it's not until you once you leave that environment and once you start looking into, cult tactics from experts who have spent, decades studying this subject, that you really realize that, oh, this did have an effect on me. This was actually pretty dangerous psychologically. And so it's, the World Mission Society Church of God, hits every checkpoint of a high demand group.
There you go.
So
right, Jordan.
A few other points, and let's move through these quickly and try to wrap this up. So he became a Seventh-day Adventist. Are there any quick comments we want to make on that?
Messed up church.
Yeah. Obviously, counter beliefs to what the World Mission Society Church of God teaches. So it just, again, it begs the question, if this is God, why would he be joined to Buddhism and Seventh-day Adventism?
They have
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, in regards to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they have a study that's called The Seven Churches in the book of Revelation. And they say that the Church of Laodicea, I don't know the correct pronunciation, that's how they pronounce it. The Church of Laodicea is referring to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And they say from that prophecy, that explains why he had to be baptized in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that it was an actual prophecy.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next point would be that he didn't believe in Heavenly Mother. He did not believe in Mother God. Not only did he not believe in her, he vehemently taught against that doctrine. He never rose from the dead or ascended, but what he did do was
There was an unpublished
die.
book about that.
About what now? Oh, yes.
No, there was an unpublished book. And what was that one called? Problems with the New Jerusalem and the veils, right? And he goes into great detail. We've done that on
That one was
we've done that previous episode.
Yeah.
Right, but they don't publish it now. I mean, so, not by the WMSCOG.
It's just another example of them hiding stuff.
Right, but in that book, the whole point of the book is to say, hey, there is no Heavenly Mother. And for people who haven't seen that video, that's why we're covering this Ahnsahnghong now, Contrasting with Christ. He basically said, anyone who believes in a Heavenly Mother is delusional, is out of their mind. There is no Heavenly Mother. He hammers that point throughout his book. And he didn't say the church teaches it, but Ahnsahnghong.
Well, he didn't say that. He didn't say that because the World Mission Society Church of God, they say that, that book is directed at Suing, right? So he doesn't say the idea of Suing being God the Mother is delusional. He says the idea of a God the Mother is delusional.
Right. he says that's the unchanging truth of God. So that's another, we've
Yes.
talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's probably going to be a link to that book in the video description. But Ahnsahnghong did not, one of the core doctrines of the World Mission Society Church of God, Ahnsahnghong refuted clearly.
Right.
Again, he died. It's Romans 6, 9 that says that Christ was raised from the dead. He cannot die again. Death no longer has mastery over him. So very, very specifically, and this is
Not
one of those
according to
places
them.
where this is one of those places where the way they wiggle out of that verse, I can't even remember what the explanation is that I was given to that, but I've been given an explanation to that by members at different times, and it's just one of those places where it's like you have to do so many mental gymnastics and twist and contort the text so much that it's just obvious they're trying to get out of a verse that clearly contradicts something. So Ahnsahnghong died in spite of the fact that the New Testament says Christ would or cannot,
not die
depending on
again.
your translation, die again.
Amen.
And he never fulfilled any real prophecies. Emphasis on real prophecies. And the reason we say that is because, as Kelsey said before, there's a lot of made up, invented prophecies. For example, I think the idea that the fig tree in Matthew, that's a prophecy, is a load of baloney, to be honest. I mean, you look at it and you look at the same example, the same situation in Luke, where Jesus tells the same parable of the fig tree, and he says something specific. He says, learn the parable or the analogy or something of the fig tree. He doesn't say, listen to the prophecy of the fig tree. He says, this is a parable. It was simply a way of saying, look, you know that when trees' leaves, they start to fall, you know that, or is it the other way around? He says you can know by the way trees are behaving, you know that the seasons are about to change. And so in the same way, when you see all these things, wars, famines, all these things, you know that the end is near. He's not making a prophecy. He's giving a simple
they say the fig tree is Israel.
For an example.
So they're saying, they're trying to say the fig tree is Israel there, but that's not the point when you read the passage closely, like Jordan said. It's not talking about anything at all but Israel, just saying, just as a fig tree, you know when the time is there, know by my signs I'm telling you about when I'm going to return. That's it.
Yeah.
And
that's not to say
not
to say that the fig tree doesn't ever represent Israel, because I think there's times where the fig tree does, but I think that's totally missing the point of what Jesus was trying to convey.
Absolutely.
The fig tree prophecy it's just not a prophecy. And the same thing.
Realized with this.
Real quick, another example of a prophecy, again, why I emphasize that Ahnsahnghong never fulfilled real prophecies, would be the David prophecy, the 40-year prophecy. The question I always ask members, and I've never gotten a good explanation for or answer to, is where in the Bible does it say that there is a 40-year prophecy or a prophecy that would say Christ must reign for 40 years? It's just one of those places where it's assumed that this is a prophecy, because David reigned for 40 years, although his reign was divided into, I think he reigned, was it 13 years, Steve? Are you familiar with that? He reigned 13 years over a portion of the kingdom and 30 some years over the rest. I can't remember the numbers exactly. But that's interesting, because if you're going to take David's 40-year reign and say that's a prophecy of what Christ will do, well, then that division where David reigned over a certain portion for a certain amount of time, and then he finished the 40 years. The 40 years was made up of two separate time periods of reigning over two separate places, and so you would need to apply that and say that's also a prophecy.
And we also talked in 2 Chronicles 35:18. It says that David never even kept the Passover. So if he was supposed to be the fulfillment of the root of David, well, how come David never even kept the Passover? 2 Chronicles 35:18.
Not only that, but they said that's the sure sign.
None of the kings of Israel taken it.
They said that's the sure sign by which we can recognize the prophetical King David is that he will establish a Passover. But why is that the sure sign? Why is that the key identifying factor when the actual David never kept the Passover? So
great point.
And he was still a man after God's own heart.
Yep. So one more thing, Kelsey.
Yeah, he was a man after God's own heart.
And a man after God's own heart who didn't keep Passover. So apparently you can be after God's own heart without keeping Passover.
Not keep the Passover, yeah.
But the point of bringing up the fig tree and the 40 year real quick is just to say, like, you guys are putting so much stock on these things. You know, I would almost guarantee probably if I got in a conversation, a one-on-one conversation with you as a member and said, why do you believe Ahnsahnghong is God? Like, you're giving your life away to this dead South Korean man. Why? Most likely, there's a good chance you're going to bring up one of those two or another prophecy, but probably one of those two. And so what I would challenge you to do is just step back and consider, are these even prophecies in the first place? Like, did the Bible ever intend there to be a 40-year prophecy? And if so, show me where in the Bible it says that the Messiah, when he came, would reign for 40 years. Just because David reigned for 40 years, again, it was divided into separate time. It wasn't a full 40 years over the same place. Just because David did that, you can't just assume that therefore that's a prophecy that Christ would do that. Moses went into the wilderness for 40 years. Does that mean, by your logic, that must mean that that's a prophecy that when Christ comes, he would have to live in the wilderness for 40 years before he started his ministry in the same pattern as Moses. So you're just picking and choosing examples from the Bible and saying, oh, this one's a prophecy, but here's another example that's almost exactly the same. We're not going to call this a prophecy for whatever reason. So stop and think about this. Yeah. Why you're putting so much stock on prophecies, that these prophecies prove Ahnsahnghong. Well, first of all, you got to prove that these are prophecies in the first place. Like, at least for your own sake, figure out why you believe in the first place that these are even prophecies. Because I don't think they are.
Yeah.
So we have to look at Hebrews 9:28 before we finish looking at this, because that's their other big passage they want to use. And
okay. Let's have Kelsey make her comment that you wanted to say, and then let's go to Hebrews 9:28, and then we'll.
She has something.
Well, so I thought I had something, but I think I am okay now.
Okay.
I'm okay now.
All right.
So one of the big proof texts they use beside the root of David, they love using Hebrews 9:28, and this is a classic example of how not to read the Bible. And I'll just read the verse, and I just love the time that, Kelsey was on the show before I joined you guys, and she kind of read the passage in context and goes, oh my gosh, look at that. I never read it that way before. And I'll just read it, and I'll let Kelsey comment on that. So Christ also, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, I'm reading the New American Standard, will appear a second time for salvation without reference to sin to those who eagerly await him. And Kelsey, they just love to use that passage, right, to show how he's coming twice. Why don't you really quick explain how they use it, and then what you noticed to make sure that how this verse is completely butchered?
Well, how they use it, they would say, Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many. That was Jesus when he died on the cross 2,000 years ago. But it says, and he will appear, meaning the same Jesus who died on the cross 2,000 years ago, he's going to appear a second time. But not to bear sin, but to bring what? Salvation. So the same Jesus who appeared 2,000 years ago, he will come again, and he will bring us salvation. But it says to those who, that's how they would explain it. They would stop there, and they would explain it.
They could have stopped there.
Yeah, but the thing is you got to read a little bit further.
Detail.
He will bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. But who is waiting for Ahnsahnghong? Right? Nobody. Nobody was waiting for Ahnsahnghong.
And the translations I read say those who are eagerly waiting for him.
Yeah, nobody. Yeah,
but according to the WMSCOG, the truth has been lost at that point. When Ahnsahnghong came onto the scene, the truth was lost. The church was in darkness. Nobody knew the truth. That's the point. That's the whole emphasis of why Ahnsahnghong had to come back, to restore the truth. Mm-hmm. So if nobody had the truth, if nobody was in the truth, who are these who are eagerly waiting for the appearing of second coming Christ?
Nobody.
Nobody.
Yeah, that verse that's one of their main proof texts.
Well, and also think about it. It says to those who are eagerly waiting for second coming Christ, right? If you understand in the sense that, general Christians, right, they wait for the appearance of second coming Christ. They have a different understanding of the appearance of second coming Christ, but, they're waiting, for Christ to come again, right? But none of those people, most of those people do not believe in Ahnsahnghong, right? They should have been the first in line to get that salvation from Ahnsahnghong. But from my experience in the World Mission Society Church of God, most of the people who join either have no background in the Bible, or maybe they grew up a certain religion, but again, are not literate in the Bible. And so I can tell you right now, those waiting for him to come a second time, most of them didn't get it. There were people waiting in the, 60s and 70s, but they didn't get it.
Baptist church, whatever.
Yeah, they should have been first in line according to this verse.
Yep.
Right? But
anyway, bottom line is there's nobody waiting for him back in 48 whatsoever.
And there's no proof that he was even... There's no proof he was baptized in 1948 as well.
Right.
So,
which is
or 54.
Whole issue in itself.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
54 more. Yes.
There's some kind of, it is written down and recorded that he was baptized in 1954, but that's what that was recorded that he was baptized after the fact, but it is a record, and it's a handwritten record that has not been changed. You can see within the picture. So that's the only kind of proof as to anything related to his baptism that exists. And again, nothing exists concerning 1948.
Yep. So Jesus, in contrast, first performed miracles, signs, and things that you would expect from one who is supposedly God. And so if the WMSCOG, again, going back to what we started with, if they say, oh, well, signs and wonders is a sign of false prophets, well, I'd say, again, so is teaching. So by that standard, if you're gonna say me requesting signs and wonders is to request the sign of a false prophet, I would say, well, for you to request Bible teaching, then correct Bible teaching is to also request the sign of a false prophet. Because false prophets don't just do signs and wonders. False prophets teach. In fact, it's their teaching that is, biblically, I think, more dangerous, more deceptive than the signs and wonders. It's what they're teaching that causes the signs and wonders to be so deceptive. And so, but Jesus did true miracles, healed, raised people from the dead, things like that, things that attested to the fact that he was more than just a man. Great claims, extraordinary claims, I think it's fair to say require or deserve extraordinary evidence. And so Ahnsahnghong did no miracles, Jesus did. Jesus fulfilled real Bible prophecies, right, in contrast to the made-up, invented prophecies that the WMSCOG just pulls out of the Bible.
Or leverages from other churches, like the coming from the east, leverage from the Moon Sam Young's church, coming in the clouds, leverage from that church as well. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So ahead, Jesus, Steve. I was just saying to say, so Jesus, for example, look at the difference between Jesus and Ahnsahnghong. It was prophesied that Jesus would be born of a virgin, born in Jerusalem, sold for 30 pieces of silver. He would be pierced. You've got like Isaiah 7:14, 9:6, 11:1, Micah 5:2, Psalm 22, Isaiah 53. You have all these classic passages, Zechariah, before crucifixion was even invented yet. by the Romans. It would talk about how he would be pierced. And all these different prophecies, hundreds of them fulfilled for Christ with great detail. And you find anything like it for Ahnsahnghong. They basically, we said earlier, they kind of read back into the text and try to find things that support him, like looking for the stuff of the East, or all the prophecy made is completely different story about Christ. How everything was predicted right from the book of Genesis chapter 3 all the way 3:15 and on.
Yep. And then the most importantly, Jesus rose from the dead, was dead for 3 days, buried, and rose from the dead. And not just as this claim that's made about him, but there's actually like pretty compelling historical evidence that suggests that crazy claim is valid. And so I want to read really quick Acts. Where is it? Let me see here. Oh, actually, I have it written down. So Acts 17:31 says, "For God has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead." And then Acts 1:3 says, "After his suffering, he presented himself to them and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. He appeared to them over a period of 40 days and spoke about the kingdom of God." So again, to contrast Jesus and Ahnsahnghong, Jesus rose from the dead, provides convincing proof. When the book of Acts was written, it seemed like it was just common knowledge that something had happened with Jesus, that his body was not available, that it was gone, and that not only that, but you read like 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul's talking about the witnesses who saw Jesus, the witnesses, the disciples who personally saw him and met with him after his death. And so, unlike Ahnsahnghong, Jesus gave evidence, proof of who he was. And so it's not evil or sinful or a characteristic of a false prophet to request that if one is going to claim or be claimed about to be Christ come again, God in the flesh, to ask for or desire some sort of evidence for that. Go read through the Gospel of John and see how over and over Jesus says things like this. He says, "Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me," or at least believe on account of the works themselves. And then again in John 10:38, he says, "If I do them, even if you do not believe me, believe the works." So Jesus is constantly calling attention to the fact that he's doing things to prove who he is. He's not just saying, "Believe me because I say it, and if you don't, you're going to hell because you're just hard-hearted and you're just deceived by Satan, gaslighting type stuff." He didn't do that. He said, "Look, guys, look at what I'm doing. If you don't believe what I'm saying, at least believe the works that I've shown you." Ahnsahnghong did nothing like that. Nothing. So I think
Jesus lived a perfect, sinless life.
Yes, that was the last
perfect,
thing.
sinless life. He performed miracles. I think the Jewish signs of like the Messiah would be he'd raise the dead, he'd cast out demons, and heal lepers. And it's like, look at the miracles. Beside raising from the dead, where's Ahnsahnghong's miracles like that too? What a different caliber of Messiah. He's just like a man who came, a sinful man who died, stayed dead in his grave. He's got a gravestone marking where he is. It says Elijah on it. He didn't ascend like the real Christ. He didn't live a perfect, sinless life. He had children. He lived a regular human life, born as a Buddhist, grew up a Seventh-day Adventist, which is a false religion too. So he's gone through 2 false religions. Then he started a third one, made false prophecies, a completely different character than Christ, who's the maker of this world.
Yep. So Jesus had a superior moral character, I would say, obviously, to Ahnsahnghong. You can find,
and also,
just like with people like Joseph Smith or Muhammad or other false prophets, you can dig up dirt on these guys. You can always dig up dirt on them. You can dig up dirt on Ahnsahnghong. You can't do that with Jesus. What were you going to say,
And
Kelsey?
also, Jesus preached to homeless people and prostitutes. And Ahnsahnghong's church, you're not allowed to preach to homeless people.
Superior,
and also, I remember one time I was preaching to a woman who was, I had met her at a mall, and she was, I guess, part-time, like, burlesque dancer. But she accepted the church 100%, but the church wouldn't baptize her unless she quit that job.
Yeah.
So, just saying, that's another difference.
So,
Kelsey, I think of when you say that passage, Ray Jordan, the passage in Matthew 25 where he goes, unless you do this, the least of these. That's kind of like the homeless people. People had no food to drink, and you bring them, water in Christ's name, or, stuff, visit them in prison. This like the homeless people, that's who Christ said, go out in the highways and byways and all that. And, here's the church that tells you not to preach disabled or homosexuals or people who are disabled, the people who really need the Lord.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's not even just don't baptize these people. It's don't even preach to them at all. I've seen people come into the church that are transgender or, in the LGBTQ plus community. And what happens is because someone will bring them in, a leader will see, and they say that they'll send somebody else to check and see if they really are transgender or if they, really are LGBTQ. And then they will do whatever they can to get that person to leave. They'll physically walk them out of the church. I've seen it with my own eyes.
Yeah. Yep.
What a difference between the gospel.
Yeah.
What a difference.
They're not even given a chance to listen to the sermons. They're just immediately taken out.
False church.
But yet they want to preach to 7 billion people. But there's certain people that they won't do it too. So you'll never see a disabled leader in the church.
Yep.
It's just the way the World Mission Society Church of God is.
Yeah.
So and we even have it recorded on one of the live videos that we did with a member. He acknowledged that they don't preach to homeless people.
Yeah.
So
that's true. We've heard it from a lot of people.
Yeah.
So if God came as a man, what would you expect that to look like? That's a question as we wrap this up, I'd challenge everybody to think about. What would you expect that to look like? Stop and actually be honest with yourself and say, again, this is something you're giving your life to. What, I'm staking my life on this belief that this Korean man is God. If God came into this world as a man, what do I think that would be like? What would that look like? Again, if you look at Jesus, what you see is this Jewish man who lived 2,000 years ago is arguably the most influential person in human history, and all of Western civilization as we know it is basically the way it is because of this Jewish man who lived 2,000 years ago. So many things that have developed, like art and medicine. Science,
calendar.
Things like that the calendar, right? Your calendar is based upon the birth of this Jewish man. You kind of look at that, you look at the effects of Jesus on the world, and it at least should make one, I think, stop and pause and say, what's going on here with this person? You look at that, and then you also add to that the moral superiority of this man, as we've talked about. But then you look at Ahnsahnghong, and in what way, again, I know you're immediately going to say, well, prophecy. Well, I don't think the prophecies are as compelling or convincing as you think, and I think a lot of the prophecies that you are, again, basing your belief system on are not prophecies at all. That's something hopefully I'd love to just do a video or even a series going through the supposed Ahnsahnghong prophecies. But what would you expect God coming into the world to look like? And does Ahnsahnghong in any way meet that criteria of what you think it should look like? When you compare it to what Jesus's life and his impact on the world looks like, there's just no comparison. There's nothing more significant about Ahnsahnghong than there is about Joseph Smith or Muhammad or the Xinjiang pastor, whatever his name is, Lee Man He or something like that. I can't remember his name.
He meant Lee.
Yeah.
But the Ahnsahnghong is a false Jesus who cannot save, bottom line. I showed you the verse in 2 Corinthians, and there's false Christs out there, and the false Christ cannot save. So just really want to encourage everyone who's watching this to really test this. Like Jesus said in Matthew chapter 16, he said, "Whom do men say that I am?" And some say that you're Elijah. Some say, all these different things. But, it's important that you have the right Jesus. So you don't have a false Jesus, a false Christ, a false Messiah, because that's Jesus cannot save. And, look at Matthew chapter 16. I talk about this verse a lot, where Jesus said, "I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." Well, in the Church of God, as you know, right, Kelsey, the church, the gates of hell did prevail against the true church. The true church was lost for decades and decades. There was a dark ages. But Jesus promised that the gates of hell would never prevail against his church, and the true church would stand. And who are you going to believe there? Are you going to believe Jesus? Or are you going to believe, Kim Jong-Kim, when he says, that the true church disappeared during the dark ages, it had to be restored by the Church of God. Jesus promised that would never happen, and I put my faith in him.
And also, if the church, if someone is the true Christ, right? The church shouldn't have to work so hard to cover up anything about that person or what they said or what they did,
what they taught,
but
removing chapters from his book.
What they taught. Yeah, like the World Mission Society Church of God has had to do serious damage control over, Ahnsahnghong's books, over their past teachings. So that in and of itself should show the validity of, their organization, but also it should show that, Ahnsahnghong, he is not second coming Christ. He is not Christ. He is just a man who makes mistakes like all of us.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
Well said.
And if you were, going to a church and they're teaching from the pulpit saying, Jesus claimed to be God and he performed miracles and he did many things to love the poor and the broken, and those were the things they were teaching you. But then you discover that they've actually been, they have this whole other book that is clearly, it was written by Jesus. Say that there were 3 chapters written by Jesus, but they were hiding those. And then you found out that in those chapters, Jesus was clearly saying, I never did miracles. That's not the point why I came. I'll never do miracles. I don't even know how. I can't do it. Completely contradicting what you've been being taught. You would say, okay, something's up here. This is kind of looking scammy, and there's probably a reason they remove those chapters, because it doesn't fit the agenda of what they're trying to teach me. And that is exactly that scenario is exactly what is happening to you guys as members of the World Mission Society Church of God. You got this guy who supposedly is God, Christ come again, and like Kelsey said, your organization has to constantly try to cover things up, remove chapters from his book, remove teachings that contradict their agenda and what they want you to believe about him and what he taught. Complete night and day difference between Ahnsahnghong and Jesus.
If half of what we said is true today, you've got a problem. If 10% of what we say today is true,
great point.
there's a huge problem.